this video, I'm going to talk about the reasons why it might and might not be a good idea to get started with Age of Sigmar. And for me, it started with one kit in particular. It's tabletop time. So when this kit was announced at Las Vegas Open, I was really excited. While I technically hadn't started a Daughters of Cain army, I just thought this character was absolutely gorgeous and she had a really cool backstory too. And Games Workshop kindly sent us this kit to check out, which I'm really excited for. So this kit reminds me very much of the Balthanos kit that we also received from GW. It came with a new model as well as a couple of other units that you could add to your army. These kits are definitely worth the value if you like everything in them, which is kind of where my problem lies. I'm not a huge fan of these cavalry units. I think they're just really old and they look a little bit weird when compared to the rest of the Daughters of Cain army. But unfortunately, they're pretty much a core unit of this army and of Age of Sigmar, so maybe that's why I've never started a Daughters of Cain army. But I think there's a few more reasons as to why I'm holding back. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about this kit in particular and start building up our Crone host. Building Krathus's Crone host is really easy, with all of her instructions fitting onto one page. This was a little bit of a surprise to me. I guess I was expecting her to be a little bit bigger, but hey, I'll take an easy build for a change. This model has a ton of textures onto it, which is going to be really interesting to paint up. While there's a couple of things I do struggle with painting, hair is definitely on the top of my list. But hey, you win some, you lose some. I don't have to paint a face this time around, just a butt ton of hair. While building up this model, I can say it is absolutely gorgeous. The pose and all of the little bits and pieces look really, really nice. These wings are really gorgeous too, but for now I'm going to leave these off because I want to paint these separately, not while they're on the model. So for my Daughters of Cain, I have a really cool idea of how I want to base these, which I'll explain a little bit later on. But for now, I need to raise her up, so I'm going to do that by adding a layer of corkboard. I'm then going to hack and tear my way through to give it that really nice texture and show a little bit more of the base. I then filled this in with some astrogranite texture. I will say I did have one small gripe with this model, and that was this area where her foot is sitting. I understand that sometimes you need to design things that interlocked with each other to create a secure bond, but it did stand out a little bit. So I added a tiny bit of texture paste in here too, just to fill this gap nicely. Once this was all dry, I gave her a black prime coat and also a tiny dry brush so I could add in some OSL a bit later, and she was pretty much ready to go. So while I start painting my model, let's get to the actual issue at hand. Is it a good idea to start collecting Warhammer Age of Sigmar at this point in time? There's a couple of things to go over with the perspective of being a new player, a veteran, or even just a hobbyist, as well as my personal experience in the Age of Sigmar community. So firstly, is a new edition of Age of Sigmar coming out? GW has released 3 versions of Age of Sigmar since it first came out in 2015. Roughly 3 years separate each edition from the newest version. And if my timing is correct, a new edition should be just on the horizon. Currently, there's a few options if you wanted to get started collecting Age of Sigmar today. The edition starter kit called Dominion is still available to buy. Of course, this only matters if you like both of these armies. These are pretty good value for money and will have everything you need if you are a beginner. Otherwise, each army has their own Vanguard box, containing the core of your Age of Sigmar army and gives you a good place to start. Vanguard boxes can change from time to time as new armies get updates, including new mini releases. So if you see a Vanguard box and you like everything in it, it may be a good idea to pick it up. New editions are a fantastic way to get people back into the hobby. We locally saw a big resurgence with Warhammer 40k when 10th edition was released. You'd be entering the hobby at the same time as other people, which means more hype and more games to play. There are so many positive things that can happen with a new edition being released. So I should hold off starting a new army then? Well, not necessarily. Due to a new edition coming out, retailers may feel inclined to discount some of their old stock, meaning that you may be able to get it for cheaper. Collectors might be more inclined to sell off their older miniatures knowing that newer ones are coming. If you're someone that's in this position, it may be a good idea to keep a close eye on your local retailer because you don't know if they're going to lower prices on some of your favorite kits. Of course, this is all speculation and not fact. We have no idea if GW is even working on a new edition for Age of Sigmar. But I certainly hope so because having a big release party is one of my favorite events to go to. But what about unavailable items? If you're someone that's been collecting Age of Sigmar for a while, you'll probably have noticed the same thing that I have. And that's the availability of some miniatures and even war scrolls on the Games Workshop website. War scrolls are used to play Age of Sigmar and will list all of the abilities and rules that you need for your army. Every faction's rules and war scrolls are available on the Age of Sigmar app, which is free to download. It can be super handy in a pinch, plus it's also updated, meaning that you don't have to worry about your rules being wrong. However, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a huge fan of the app. It can be really frustrating having to navigate back and forth to get certain rules for your unit, and it can become super cumbersome. This is versus having the cards visually laid out in front of you, nice and cleanly, so you're able to see everything. Typically, these cards are released when an army has an update along with your battle tome. Just as a side note, it would be really awesome if these new boxes that we get came with a war scroll card included. You do get the rules for the new unit in there, but it's on the back of your instructions, and I don't know who really wants to carry around the pamphlet that they have to build their minis out of. A little card that would be inserted that you can just add to your deck would be a really nice touch. It's also worth mentioning that some miniature kits have been unavailable for a long period of time. While it's not Age of Sigmar exclusively, I have been waiting for these Shadow Stalkers for well over a year, and they're still not available. I know this is kind of notorious among all of the Games Workshop factions and game systems, and I do feel like it is getting a little bit better. But if you're starting a new army, it is something to keep in mind, because the kits that you may want may become unavailable, and you don't know when they're going to come back in stock. However, if you're wanting to get into Skaven, I'd probably hold off for a little while. Myself and Dave speculate that maybe Skaven will be part of the new edition army starter set, so who knows, they're primed for an update either way. Speaking of miniatures, Games Workshop has been releasing some really cool kits for their armies in Age of Sigmar. Take the new releases coming out for Flesh Eater Courts, for example. There's some awesome minis in this lineup, and while it's not an army I personally would collect, I can really appreciate how cool this is, and I really want to verse them on the battlefield. Now, as I said before, some of the additions that are coming out for Dawnbringers are really good value. If you don't have the extra minis that come with the new model, they can be a really good option even if you're a new or old player, which is why this kit was so tempting for someone like me to get started. The Crone Host is absolutely gorgeous, and the Witch Elves are cool too, but unfortunately the Horsemen are kind of super ugly. So what do I do? Do I hold my breath and hope that Games Workshop will release new Horsemen specifically for the Daughters of Cain? Or do I bite the bullet and start my army today? I think based on this video and how much I've enjoyed painting this Crone Host, I think that answer has already been made for me. But the Crone Host still has a bit of work to go, so let's head over to tabletop time and I'll give my final thoughts on this whole thing at the very end of the video. So I'm not going to go through the entire process of how I painted this Crone Seer, but let you guys know the thought process behind painting it. Overall, I wanted to keep the colors very dark and moody, but still incorporate some of her signature looks such as her hair color and her raven wings. I color shifted the palette just a little bit slightly to look more harmonious with other models I have painted. I just went ahead and started layer painting everything up and blending it in all together, making sure to incorporate those little textures where needed. Now technically, this Crone Seer wasn't the first kit that got me into wanting to start a Daughters of Cain army. So a model that I picked up recently for Daughters of Cain was the massive Morathi piece. For those that don't know, she's the massive snake lady from Age of Sigmar, and I have loved this model ever since it came out. And I originally decided to buy this piece to try and enter it into Golden Demon, but unfortunately she isn't going to make it.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
So I'm going to keep working on her and maybe enter her into something else. Even if I don't, I'm still really happy with the work I've done. This all leads up to what I'm going to base my Daughters of Cain in. So over the Christmas break, I ordered this really cool kit from Green Stuff World, and it's a kit that includes all the things you need to build specific bases. I decided I wanted to try a little bit of OSL lighting, and I think that lava bases can be really cool. I have all of the components here, and these things are pretty cool. They have a little guide on the inside of how to build up these bases, and there's a ton of options to choose from. So I haven't actually tried any of this, and I'm too scared to do it on Morathi. So I'm gonna try it on the Crone Seer and see what it turns out like. This is why I had to paint the base white before I could do anything else to it. So I'm gonna follow this little guide and give you a little walkthrough on what I use for the base and what I think about this kit in general. Let's do it. So this kit comes with a range of different bits and pieces, including some paints and even some terrain pieces you can add to your base. But for today, I'm just going to be using the paints, and I'll probably use the other stuff on my other bases. The booklet that came with the box said to start out with 2 layers of the intensity ink, and the first color up was Phoenix Orange. It said to apply this in the areas that are in between the lava. I found that the best place to lay this down was on the rocks and a little bit on the edge, creating a soft gradient effect that the yellow would be able to sit in the middle. These intensity paints are actually really nice. On top of white, they come out beautifully, and once they dry down, they're even more vibrant. I did use 2 layers of both of these paints for my model. Once that was dry, I used these 2 splash fluoro paints that are also from this kit, and these are kind of more like a gel. They work similar to water effects, but they have a color in them. When pulling out this gel, I was worried it was looking very bubblegummy pink, and it was looking a bit strange. I knew that it would dry down a little bit differently, but I wasn't too sure. I applied the pink color where I had laid down that Inkintensity orange, and using the orange to blend it in a little bit to the base. This took a little bit of time to dry, so I started working on the rest of the model before I could touch it again. I still had this smoke to paint in the middle of the dish, and I went back and forth trying to look up reference images of smoke. At times I felt like I was pulling too much of the yellow, so I went back and made sure that the yellow was smaller than the red. And I was really happy with how this effect turned out. Once that splash paint had dried down, I decided I wasn't super happy with the color. It was looking a little bit too candy for my liking, so I used the Inkintensity paints again on top just to bring this back to a more reddish tone. And again, these Inkintensity paints are actually really good. They went on top beautifully and gave it that vibrant color that I wanted. Overall, this kit is really cool. I think it comes with some really awesome paints to experiment with and bits and pieces to make your bases look awesome. It's also really good if you're making bigger size pieces, such as titans or monsters, and I think the effect is really gorgeous. Just to finish it all off, I gave everything a really light dry brush with a bright yellow, and then trimmed the base with the black to give it that final touch. And here is my Crone Seer all painted up, and I'm super proud of this model. I do tend to speed paint a lot, but it was nice to sort of relax and put a lot of effort into a mini that I think is really, really cool. For the past couple of months, I haven't been able to paint stuff that I've really enjoyed, but the past few videos I've been able to do, I've really been able to sink my teeth into projects that I think are really awesome. But showing this model here doesn't do enough justice. Let's go have a look at some reveals and my final thoughts for this project. A huge thank you to everyone over on Patreon. It's because of you guys I get to make super passionate and fun videos like this one. If you'd like to join our Patreon, you get awesome perks just by signing up, and all of the links are down in the description below. Again, a huge thank you to each and one of you, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. So that's pretty much it for this video, and answering the question if you should get into Age of Sigmar. While I can't necessarily answer that question for you, hopefully I've given you some thought if it's something that you've wanted to do. I personally think that yes, I will probably be starting a Daughters of Cain army. Either way, I've got a really good base to build some models off of, and maybe I can even play a game sometime soon. But all I ask is Games Workshop, can you please change them, please? Thank you. That'd be great. Thank you. Bye, everyone.